Sadly, I'm getting to the point where I really can't identify these guys anymore.
They look like the IBM 3840s.
Okay, we're gonna get into geek nostalgia here.
They look like they're tracks.
Back in the day.
I got one sitting on my desk.
Oh, jeez. Okay, we're moving on from this slide.
Retro, he said retro.
That's absolutely, you got to do the retro thing. But see, and that's actually part of the challenge is that there are a lot of organizations who are exactly still in that same boat because it worked. It did what they needed to do. But the challenge is that it doesn't necessarily do what you're going to need it to do in the case of a disaster. And if the disaster hasn't happened yet, you don't necessarily realize the shortcomings. So, let's talk about this, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we've got file-based and volume. And volume is essentially, or excuse me, file-based is literally, I copied these files over to this device or this material over here, so I've got a copy. I'm backed up, okay? Which you better make sure that you've got all the files that you need. You better make sure that they're in a way that we can restore, has its limitations. But that's the way we used to do things because it was the easy thing. And it protects the data, absolutely. However, volume. If we think about the hard drive as literally a series of sectors, of little pieces, parts that are physically laid out on the drive itself. And by the way, this is not 100% accurate because of either virtualization or SSDs or they're in the cloud, whatever. Deal with it. And we literally back up based on that volume. So whatever's happening in the volume, we back up where the drive, what's actually on the drive, the disk itself. Still pretty much easy to use, looks the same way, and it protects the data, but it also is an image of the disk. So all we have to do to restore the whole disk is to literally plop that image, sector for sector, onto wherever we want to restore to. And the nice thing is, we focus on the recovery. With the data-only backups, we still had to rebuild the server, we still had to put together, install the OS, install the application. No, with the volume backup, that's it. Now, more and more companies are doing volume backups. If you've implemented a backup solution within the last 2 or 3 years, you're probably doing volume backups, okay? They are by far and away the most common backup methods to use these days, So what we have is we have our production servers here, and then we're going to be backing up to a device, an appliance. We usually call it BDR, backup disaster recovery. This is one methodology, by the way. So what happens is we've really got 3 sets of the server. We've got the production server itself. We've got where we're backing up to, our backup device, which is also on the location. And then we're going to put it up in the cloud. You notice we have two clouds in this particular case. This is the storage cloud. So we're backing up and we're pushing it here. So we've got 1, 2, 3 sets. And when we're doing this with what are called backup chains. And a backup chain is a full backup of the disk plus incrementals representing sequences in time. So we start with, let's say, hourly incrementals, which means that every day we create 24 incrementals if it's a 24-hour shop. Let's just make it an 8-hour shop. We're going to do 10. So we're going to do 10 backups. So we have 10 backups through the day. And then we'll consolidate those into a daily backup. And then we'll consolidate 7 of the dailies into a weekly, and we'll consolidate 31 into a monthly. But any way you look at it, we have a chain of backups. So if this was today and we wanted to recover, and we started backing up in, let's say, March 12th. So we have the first backup on March 12th, and then we have the month, the end of the month for March, end of the month for April, end of the month for May, June, July, August, September, and then we have the first 4 or 5 days of October. That creates a backup chain. All of that is stored here and there. So we can actually go back to March, April, May, and we can load that server. We can load that backup. So we can recover data that was just deleted 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. But we can also virtualize a production server, And I actually rearranged the slides and I didn't move the arrow, so I apologize for that. So we can take the production server, and if the production server goes out, we can virtualize that server so it's running here. And when it's running here, the users don't see the difference. The users are still connecting to the server. The server has the same MAC address, IP address, name, DNS record, everything. Now, usually, the BDR is less powerful because it's meant to be used in emergencies. So it's not going to run as fast, but it gives you the ability to fix the production server. So in this particular case, remember our 10 o'clock failure? Or our 10 o'clock backup, and we had a 10:55 loss? So we're able to boot here based on where this server was as of 10 o'clock. These users will have to rebuild that 55-minute worth of data. But the only activity that really needs to happen, and this is where we're not, it's not a failover, it's not an automatic failover, is someone needs to triage this. Because honestly, in some cases, reboot the server and everything's fine and we don't lose any data. Otherwise, we have to boot here. They may, depending upon the application, have to log out and log back in. And they need to be told what they need to recreate or rebuild. So it is not a, look ma, no problem. There still is some form of activity that someone needs to do in order for this to happen. Make sense?
So even if there's an hour's worth of data loss, that doesn't necessarily mean an hour worth of downtime. You're defining your triage period of making a decision. How long do we go before we make a decision of go to the backup?
So actually, it's a good point. So let's walk through that. So at 10 o'clock, we do a backup. At 10, let's keep it easy, 10:45, we have a failure. So at 10:45, the problem starts happening. You get a call at 10:50, okay? So we've got 45 minutes of work, 5 minutes of people don't know what to do. The clock starts ticking for you. You can take a look at the server, you notice the smoke coming out of it. So, yep, that's a problem. Or you want to try rebooting it. Whatever, that's up to you to decide how long you want to take. Once you make the decision to boot this, usually for these recovery, it's a 2-boot process. You boot the server virtually here, and that literally is a right-click on the drive and say mount it, and it will start the boot process. There are different technologies. There's Datto, StorageCraft has their own. There's lots of it. They all pretty much work the same, relatively speaking. But once you make this decision, if this is a physical server, you may have to boot this virtually, disable some of its tools, and reboot it again. So for example, if you have a physical Dell server, and I know you're running Hyper-V, so this won't apply to you, but if you had a physical Dell server, you would boot it, disable all the management tools that Dell includes, and then reboot it again virtually. Because it's not running on a Dell now, you don't need that, it'll slow it down. So you may be down another 15 minutes total. So what would happen then in that case, so we have 10 to 10:45, people are working happy, 10:45 to 10:50, you find out there's a problem, takes you 10 minutes to decide, so now we're at 11 o'clock, you reboot twice, there's another 10 minutes or so with that. So at 10:10, you're contacting the users and saying, hey, whatever you did between 10 o'clock and 10:45, I said 11 and 11:10. So you basically are going to have to then go and communicate to people that whatever you did between 10 o'clock and 10:45, you're going to have to rebuild. Now, is this perfect? Is this clean? Is this absolutely? No. There is some work that's going to be involved, but we're talking, depending upon how frequently you do your backups, we're talking minutes or an hour or so, and your downtime, which is really that 10:45 to 11:10, is less than a half an hour. And people have access, and boom, you're ready to rock and or roll. Now, the one key thing though, is you have the conversation that describes this process way before you need to do it. So because it's one of those where if you try to describe to somebody what's needed at the time of the disaster, the emergency, they're going to think that you don't have a plan and you're making this up as you go. Whereas if you remember 6 months ago where I had that luncheon where we talked and I told you that this was what the process we were going to do and I gave you that one-page cheat sheet, this is it. This is what we're doing. Huge difference, huge difference. But you got to involve the business folks prior to the disaster. One of the things I keep telling people is the worst time to learn CPR is when you're having a heart attack. It's also the worst time to describe to somebody that CPR exists. Make sense? The biggie here is that we have all of these different storage technologies that have been adapted. SANS, RAIDs, iSCSI, SATA, all that. This is the real key thing. Because originally when we restored, we had to restore to the same hardware. You know, if we tried to do any kind of, you know, AMD to Intel or vice versa, or Compaq to Dell, it was a kiss of death. You had to start over again. And especially this was true if you had servers that were 4 or 5 years old and you had to restore them to it, because technology changes a little bit over 4 or 5 years. Don't know if you knew that or not. Then we had the hardware independent restore. The hardware independent restore has been around for about 4 years. That's where the software actually assists you in restoring from a Dell to an HP, from an AMD to an Intel. Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty good. It's a lot better than it used to be. But this is really where it's become much more fun, where we're backing up virtual servers. And I'm not going to go into the whole issue of virtualization and what it is or all that kind of fun stuff, except to say it's totally hardware independent. And what we're doing is we're not backing up the ESX box, we're not backing up the Hyper-V hosts, we're backing up the guest boxes that are on them. And you can either do that from the host standpoint, backing up all the servers, or backing up the servers independently. There are different tools and technologies. They have better, you know, each of them have pluses and minuses, strengths and weaknesses, but you have the flexibility of doing that. The nice thing on that is when you're backing up virtual servers, you can restore them anywhere. Like we were talking about during the break. You can restore a virtual server to a laptop and run it under the laptops, which are pretty powerful devices. So this gives you ridiculous minimal flexibility in terms of how you're going to deal with the outage. Some flexibility, much better than this, ridiculous amounts of flexibility. And remember, you don't know ahead of time what's going to fail. You don't know whether it's going to be this particular piece of hardware or the whole facility or the whole neighborhood. So you don't know where you're going to be restoring or recovering things from. And to me, it's one of those things, and I've had this discussion with some organizations where they've said, well, we're going to rent this space in case we need it. I'm like, why are you renting the space? What if that space is equally compromised? If we have the ability to find and use a space and we're flexible enough, that should be sufficient. Cool. So when we do a BDR, and by the way, not all solutions revolve around a BDR. So we're backing up images of the drives on the servers. We're getting accurate and reliable copies of data and services. This is assuming that your applications are post-2001. Because there was technologies that were introduced, VSS, volume shadow services, that were introduced in Server 2000 that made it so this technology works. Okay, if you have old technologies, there may be some limitations on this. Manage the appropriate backup image retention. When I say retention, the whole idea is how granular do you have to be in terms of history? Remember the example that I used? I basically said, I want to go back in history because I deleted something X number of days ago. I'm making you work. Yeah, it's exciting. So is it important, if we started with that March 12th, is it okay to say I have backups as of April 1st, May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, August 1st, September 1st, October 1st, and daily beyond that? Or do we want to have daily backups for the last 2 months So we're okay up to, say, July 1st, but then we've got July 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, blah, 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 blah. Or do I want daily for everybody, for everything? So I can go March 12th, March 13th, March 14th. It's okay, whatever your answer is, we don't care. There's more storage involved if we want to have, because we can consolidate 30 days of backup into one monthly backup, they'll take up less space. That may or may not be important. So we want to have that discussion. What kind of retention do you want? Validate the backup image. So we think we're backing up. That's good enough. We had a meeting this morning, started at 9 o'clock. And one of the things we were going to do was we were going to give coffee, because we thought coffee would be a great thing to give. And we discovered, and I'm not a coffee drinker, so, and Patty got out the coffee maker, which was a Mr. Coffee thing or whatever, and there's a hole in the bottom of it. Now, we used the coffee maker we brought up, the thingy, the what, was it Kirk? Whatever, I don't know. So we had a backup. But we didn't test the coffee maker, nor do I care that we didn't test the coffee maker, but we didn't test the coffee maker weekly to make sure that it's there. Okay? But that's all right, because we had a recovery plan. Because usually we save the good stuff for us. But test the integrity and simulate the access and recovery. If you don't test it, how do you know? So what we use for the BDR technology is we actually test. The backup itself is tested. We then consolidate the images. We then test all the images. We test the chain. We push it up to the cloud. We test it there. So there's a number of tests that are done, and each of those tests generates alerts. And if the update to the cloud doesn't work within it, we generate alerts there. So we're constantly generating alerts on failure. Why? Because we want to be able to recover fast and flexible. If something is not flexible, it isn't. It isn't. It might be fast. At my age, no. But anyway. And the key thing is flexible. Because I don't care what you tell me. Remember we talked about earlier, there's so many options as far as recovery. And there's so many options as far as the disaster that I don't think one single solid ironclad strategy, number one, it's going to be very expensive, and number two, it's not going to protect against all of them. But having the flexibility, but a well-defined flexibility, that's what's cool. So what we do is on the server and desktops, we install Shadow Protect. And whether it's Shadow Protect, Ream, whatever, doesn't matter. We back it up to either a local BDR or storage. If it's a BDR, the BDR has the option of virtualizing. If it's just storage, it doesn't. Okay? And then that gets pushed up to the cloud, which is then offsite replication. So we now have it, again, here, here, and here. So if a drive fails on a RAID, we're cool. If a power supply fails and we've got dual power supplies, we're cool. If it's somebody deleted a file accidentally and we can get it back using previous versions, we're cool. We're cool on a lot of areas. If not, we go here. And we've got hourly, daily backups going back however long. So we're cool, we're cool, we're cool, we're cool, and we're cool. And we've got monitoring and tests running in an automated way for all of these. Okay? So that if, I should have warned you. Something goes bad here, so what we can do is we then boot the last backup here on the recovery, if we've got a BDR here. All of the users are now connecting to this guy. They possibly have to recover some data and all that, but they're working there. In the meantime, we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that. Dell's coming out, HP's coming out. We're going to slaughter a mongoose over the keyboard. We're going to do whatever we need to in order to fix that. But we don't have to hurry. We can do it right. Because remember, we have to get another server. Go to Best Buy. Because when you're looking for servers, Best Buy is the wrong place to get a server. Sorry, Geek Squad. The truth hurts. But once we have that, We then put the server or the new server in place, and then at our leisure, we restore it, the data back. We can do that off hours. So what's happened is we've taken care of this, and hopefully the fire isn't still going. We've upgraded the server with minimal downtime, and we've been able to continue the business during that process. Yes, there was interruption. Yes, there was work that had to be caught up, but it was minimized and well defined. Okay? So we've got both backup local and remote. And one of the things, and I always bring these up in these type of talks, is to remind people this connection within the organization is usually a gigabit connection, 1,000 megabits per second. Very high speed, very good. Okay? This connection from here to the internet, not so much. Even if you got fiber, you're usually talking 20 meg. And if you've got cable, it may be 20 meg down, but it's 5 meg up, something, but it's nowhere near 1,000. So the connectivity, even if I'm running the server here virtually, the connectivity here is a very high-speed connectivity. The connectivity here for off-site storage is not. Okay? Now, I still want off-site replication because if the whole network has been compromised, I want this to have as up-to-date data as possible. In most configurations, what this means is that I will take, at the end of the day, I will take the backups that have been consolidated here and push them up to here. Now what that means is where here I have a 55-minute or a 59-minute window of vulnerability. Here I have 23 hours, 24 hours really, because I'm not pushing backups up every hour. Why? Because we don't have the pipe for it, usually. And if we can, we can. This is not something that we have to be stuck with, but usually the internet connectivity, because depending upon how big the incrementals are, to consume that upload usually is beyond the ability to do that and also maintain the business.
Do you get charged for the usage of the pipe going up there?
It depends entirely on the service. Are you talking about from the ISP or from the
local DVR to the remote?
That depends entirely on the service. The service that we provide, we charge simply by the server or by the workstation. So you are charged X number of dollars for the server, well, and plus either we provide the BDR for a monthly fee or you buy it yourself. It's just a server, is all it is. So you pay a monthly fee for the server. That includes the software, that includes the storage up here up to 2 terabytes. So that includes the whole, so it doesn't matter how much as long as it's under 2 terabytes. And if you have 2 servers, then it's 2 times that fee and it's 4 terabytes. And one server can have 3 terabytes and the other one has 1 terabyte, that's absolutely fine. So we've got the centrally managed, the backup files. We can easily test recovery points because we can mount the server anytime we want to and just make it so that it's not visible to the rest of the network. We can boot the server virtually. That's easy. We can recover file or systems fast and recover on-site or off-site fast. Now, what that means is that we have the ability here, and I'm going to get a little specific on what we provide. And again, this is our using eFolder. There's other, again, Datto's my favorite competitor. I love them. I know some of the guys over there, they're good product. We also love eFolder, who we use, and we prefer them, but Datto's a good example as well. So what happens is that we actually take the storage here and we can do exactly the same thing there except up here, which is to mount this as a virtual server. So we can mount your backup up in the cloud as a virtual server and then set up a VPN connection so that you can log on to your cloud server. And I think we look at a 2-hour turnaround time for that. And the reason being is you may have noticed that there were 2 clouds here. The storage cloud, which are big, slow hard drives, because they're cheap. If you decide that you need, because all of this has been compromised, the whole site, what happens is they have to migrate the backup to the continuity cloud, which are faster drives, smaller, faster drives. And then you do exactly like you would do with the BDR, except you do it in the cloud. You mount, you load, your server. So in the case of both BDR and production servers are out, you're looking at more of a 2-hour, 3-hour window to get your server back up and running. And that will include a, like I said, VPN connection and a router that you can configure to limit the connectivity. But the kind of issue that would cause that situation, you've probably got other things on your mind as far as taking 2 hours. And that for our offering, that's an additional cost, a couple $100 a week per server, depending upon the size of the server, which makes sense, honestly, because otherwise we'd be charging you for it monthly when you don't need it. And if you do need it, it's probably going to be covered by insurance. Now let's talk about virtual. We have 2 physical servers. And those 2 physical servers are completely separate, meaning their storage is separate. They are completely different physical. There's nothing shared between them. However, we're going to connect the 2 of them by a network connection. And we're going to do what's called snapshot replication. What snapshot replication does is it literally can have, every 15 minutes as an example, every 15 minutes, this physical server, which is running virtually A, B, and C, this physical server is running D, E, and F. We're basically going to say, hey, make a copy, an incremental copy for all purposes, of server A, B, and C over to this server, and this guy, D, E, and F, over to this server. So that they have copies of the virtual server updated every 15 minutes. It's the same thing as we're doing with the BDR, but notice that nothing's going off-site, nothing's going to the cloud. It's all here locally, okay? Now, fire. So what we're going to do is when we notice that this guy just had a problem, we'll boot those snapshot images over here, A, B, and C, and we've lost up to 15 minutes of data, or however frequently we do the snapshot. But it's exactly the same scenario. Okay? Now, the nice thing on this is that here, first of all, there's no software you need to buy for this. This is included in Windows. This is Hyper-V. Snapshot replication, you can do it, the heartbeat. And these don't have to be the same servers. They can be totally different servers. There's no special requirement except for these guys have to have a bit more storage because we're asking them to hold on to these image backups of another full set of servers. And they have to be connected. Usually what we do is we put a dedicated network connection between the 2 servers so that they can do the snapshot rather well. And you also have to accept that there could be a circumstance. This server, we may buy it for running 3 servers, but we need to recognize the fact that in an emergency, it may be asked to run 6 servers. So you either have to increase the memory, increase the processor maybe a little bit, or recognize the fact that if we run 6 servers, it's going to be slow. Either way. Now, here's the thing. This does nothing for offsite. There is no offsite backup in this scenario. This also does nothing for retention. The snapshots will basically go back about a week, depending upon how you configure it and store it. So if you lose something from anytime past that, this won't help you. So this is not a good full business continuity plan. But in this case, well, the nice thing is that here, I bought another server that does nothing except when I need it, except in emergencies. So I've invested in a let's say between $2,500, $3,500 server that I'm never going to use if the world treats me well. Okay? Whereas here, I've got 2 servers, but they're both busy. They're both productive. They're both working for me. I just added some additional cost, which I'm going to be able to take advantage of because they're working for me. So what I would do in this case is add a either store the backups on one of these servers that then gets pushed up to the cloud, but don't worry about a BDR, because they're BDRing each other, which just sounds weird. They're BDRing each other. Whatever. So this actually lowers the cost a bit. Okay, so you got the flexibility. Now, if you have servers lying around that can be used as a BDR, absolutely. But
So if you think of that in terms of hardware failure, it covers you. But if you've got data corruption or infection or something like that going on unrealized for a duration of time, and that's replicating every 15 minutes.
right, that's the issue. If you have, whether it be corruption, or just somebody deleted a file a week ago, a month ago, 6 months ago, this doesn't help you.
Right, question.
Yep.
In scoping out the disaster recovery, what's the upside of this approach, using this approach? What situation would you want to introduce this?
If I am running virtual servers, if I'm running servers in a virtual environment and I do not have shared storage, which is the next scenario we'll get to, this is a good scenario because I don't need to invest in this guy. What I would do, and I probably should have put a cloud or a slide together, is I would still have the backups running and to the cloud and the virtual. So I would still have all of the offsite abilities. So this is specifically how you use the virtual environment. So we would still have, what would happen is you would see these two servers would be exactly like, this guy would be running ABC, this guy would be running D, E, and F, and then this guy, instead of a BDR, would just be storage, would be a small, RAID 1 drive you can get for $500 or whatever. And it would still push up backups to the cloud. So I'd still have all these backups, but my virtualization recovery would be based on this scenario.
Is that using the virtual recovery decision, is that a cost decision or a preferential decision?
This is a performance decision. This will run better. As long as you've sized the servers properly, this will run better than your BDR. But part of it depends on what do you currently have. Because right now, companies may be looking at having, forget about business continuity for a moment. I've got 6 physical servers. I want to virtualize them. And we would look and say, well, why don't you get 2 physical servers instead of 1 big physical server, get 2 smaller physical servers, so if one fails, the other one can take over temporarily while you fix it, and rather easily. So it's giving you that business continuity, and you're still using the servers in their natural environment. You're not asking for the business continuity, the BDR, and all that fun stuff. Does that help?
Yeah, it's just, I guess, a different approach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this one, I think, plays better into your normal operational needs. The BDR just sits on the corner gathering dust. In this case, these servers are working every day for your operations and providing the backup and continuity.
Gathering dust until there's a problem and you need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But in this case, they're running and they're available if you need it. But if you look at it as far as the business getting value out of the usage of the equipment, you're getting it almost from an insurance policy standpoint in the BDR configuration, and you're getting it from a day-to-day operational standpoint in this case. Then the third scenario is where we have, I think this will, yeah. So I have the same thing. I have 2 servers, 2 physical servers running server A, B, and C, D, E, and F. However, there's a centralized storage. So there's a network storage device here. That's where everybody's running. So all of the data is actually stored here. So they are dependent. Now, Mark Twain. In this particular case, if this device goes down, you're SOL. Neither of these guys have access to the data that's necessary. So you make sure you got a single point of failure. Now, the single point of failure has a whole bunch of failover stuff. It's built to be that, this is how you're watching the basket, as Twain said. It's got redundant hard drives. It's got redundant power supplies. It's got, depending upon what you get, it's actually, some of them have redundant motherboards, okay? But what's happening is server A, B, and C, server D, E, and F, there are 6 sets of virtual hard drives up here. They're running, blah, blah, blah. So we get a failover, and it's exactly the same thing. However, in this case, there was no backup. There's no snapshot because this guy has access to the same data files. Depending upon the level of software you've got on ESX, or if you're using Hyper-V, and depending upon your applications, the failover may be 0 interruption, as in the users don't even see it, or it may look as if the server got rebooted. Okay? So depending upon the application, depending upon your virtual environment and the device, but you're not going to have that we lost 45 minutes because of this is how often we do our backups and our snapshots. So in this particular case, you've got minimal. And in the case of Hyper-V with Microsoft, there's no additional cost for this. It's there. In the case of ESX, you have to have the right level of ESX for VMware to be able to do the automated rollover. And this would be something that you could even configure in such a way that that no one has to actually take a step. It happens automatically. Again, your mileage may vary depending upon your OS, your servers, and all that kind of fun stuff. But the nice thing here is, again, we've got 2 servers. We don't have to have the extra storage because we're not making copies for 2 servers. This guy is using the exact same data files on the exact same device. It just took over. Now, now we're starting to get into more of that high availability where if a particular device or set of devices fail, there is minimal to 0 interruption of service. What a lot of people don't realize is high availability is as dependent in a lot of ways on the application as it is on the hardware. If your application is such that it can automatically save and restore connections, server, all that kind of fun stuff, then you're great shape. But in some cases, servers can't provide that because the application doesn't, and vice versa. Okay? Now, what's the downside on this? In the previous solution, we're literally just saying buy more hard drives. Okay? So we're just adding more storage. A few $100 a pop. Nothing terribly exciting. In this particular case, in order to make this work appropriately, we're buying a full storage device, which will add a couple grand. And it adds a much higher level of functionality there. Okay?
Is that something other than a SAN? Can you define what that?
Yeah, whether you call it SAN, NAS, different vendors have different definitions of it, but yeah. In a lot of cases, what will happen is, the net.
Something on site.
Yes, this is all on site. This is all on site. And then you still have that same issue, though, of how do I recover something from a week ago, from a month ago? How do I recover stuff off site? So you still need, and what you can do is you can allocate part of the storage here for the cloud backups. So you back up everything here, you have access to it if you need it, and then you push it up to the cloud. So you've got that retention handled, and you've got your off-site backups handled. But that's in addition to this. I really need to add that to the slides. Make sense? Final discussion points. Because what we've talked about is great as far as business continuity from an organizational standpoint for the primary. We're protecting the battleships. We're protecting the servers, which are consolidated. And for all purposes, any workstation should not have data on them. They should have applications. Any workstation that has data on them should be backed up using the same methodologies you have that we've talked about. Or the data should be on the servers, whether it's synchronized or whatever. They should. And any workstation that is defined as critical to the operation, you need to have this discussion for those workstations as well. And that gets into the whole, when we talk about scope, as far as how detailed do we want to get when we talk about continuity needs. But the two issues we really haven't talked about here are cloud systems and remote users. So first of all, the cloud systems, and we use Office 365, or we could use Google Docs as similar, but Office 365 as this is how we're using a standard applications, not necessarily vertical, and you could also have an ERP type system or the like. Either one of them, first of all, how are they backing up your data? You should ask that question, and they're going to give you a standard answer as far as how they're backing up your data daily. All right, and you should be used to, because that's pretty easy. But then ask, how far back can we go? How far back can we go as far as if I deleted something, or if it turned out that we had corrupted data because of something we did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, how far back can you go in your backups? And whatever the answer is, and I can't tell you whether it's good or not, you have to evaluate that. Now, there are third-party services that are coming up, and we support 2 of them, that actually will back up your cloud data. Now, primarily, they're aimed at systems like Salesforce, Google Docs, 365, and the like. But they will essentially add an additional layer of backups. If that stuff is critical, look into those. They're not that expensive. And not having access to some of that data could be catastrophic. And then finally, remote users. Those are the people who are on the road. When someone is working on your systems, your applications, remotely, are they creating or using data that is not under your control? The most common of this that we need to be concerned about is if they're just storing it on their laptop or they've got their own Dropbox. Is that an appropriate response? Is that an appropriate need or solution? Yeah, I would say no. And part of the challenge is that if you centrally as an organization don't have control over what they're doing and how they're working with it, there are more and more services and systems, and yeah, we represent a few of them, that will allow you to specify for your remote workers, here's what we're going to back up off of we can go, one of them in particular, we can actually go in, we don't even have to, as long as the client's installed on their laptop, we can go in and specify which folders we want to back up in the cloud. We don't have to connect to them, we don't have to do anything. And we can also see what they've done with them and how they've been moving them around. Similarly, if you've got people who are using VPNs to use network shares, those are usually slow. And we've also got services that'll take network shares, replicate them in the cloud, and then replicate them to offsite to people's laptops and desktops so they can work on stuff offline, as well as not worry about the VPN connections. So these are some of the big issues that have come up as well. Yes, sir.
Anything on phones,
On phone?
as far as backing up?
Yeah, usually for those guys, you've got a couple options. One is you can get into the OneDrives and Dropbox and the like. A lot of them will. So for example, my Android phone automatically, all pictures and documents synchronize with my OneDrive. Okay, I've connected with that. If you want to get into more of a mobile management, there are a lot of mobile management packages that are coming out now. Part of the challenge, though, is that you've got to recognize you're crossing that border of, if this is my phone, not the company's phone, how much responsibility, and we talked about this at our security thing, how much responsibility can I take as an organization in terms of backing up or watching or protecting or that kind of thing. So the solutions to manage the phones and to monitor and to back up the phones, they're coming out now fairly frequently and fast and furious, and Office 365 includes some for no cost and includes some for additional costs. AVG has it, Sophos has it, they're all coming out with it. But you really, in my opinion, the first thing you need to do is you need to cross that bridge as far as defining what you will do and won't do for, as far as monitoring and managing employees' phones or devices. So, cool. Yep.
This might be an unfair question, but you kick this off with that Acme
Right.
profile. So now, you know, you're sitting with the owner there, and he sits through his presentation, he decides he wants to do something, he wants to configure some sort of backup or disaster recovery.
Right.
And he comes up with a solution, or he agrees to a solution, 2016, it's gonna cost him $1,000 a month, just for sake of discussion.
Right.
As a non-technical person, will he look at that and say, okay, I'm amortizing that going forward, or can he fully expect that to have the same level of coverage 5 years from now? He's going to be paying $2,500 a month, and so he's going to come back to you as the sales guy and say, you know, what? Now I can't walk away from this because I can't afford not to have it.
Cool. So yeah, well, we all know technology is not going to change over the next few years.
I'm supposed to try.
Well, actually, no, it does a combination of things. It drives costs down, but it also drives capabilities up, and sometimes the two don't mesh together. So the issue is what type of agreement do they come up with a company? So for example, with us, we don't do long-term contracts. So we do 30-day out. So it's our responsibility to maintain a level of service that is appropriate, because if it becomes where that $1,000 a month isn't tenable, then because the needs of the organization has grown, then we can either renegotiate as far as, well, now you need 4 servers, not 2 servers, now you need this much, not this much, now you need this. We're going to raise our rates. By the same token, the business owner can come back to us and go, look, the costs have dropped like a rock because everything is so much cheaper. Instead of paying $1,000, I should pay $500. Both views are absolutely legitimate views. And with an ongoing agreement, you know, it's a legitimate discussion to have. And here's the key thing, and this is our view and our approach, is we're not in it for the agreement that you sign today. We're in it for the relationship that we want to have moving forward. And that means at any point in time, if either party stands up and goes, not what I'm expecting, then we get to change or renegotiate. Plus, if there are changes that are going to be happening because either A, the technology has increased the capabilities, so there's new features, functions, forms that are responsive. B, the business has changed because now the business has these remote users. You didn't have them last year or 6 months ago or a year ago. Or the costs have gone down because, it used to be that, well, for example, just 2 years ago, we used to charge our customers by the megabyte. The more storage you had up in the cloud, the more you paid. And you know, for a company to have a terabyte of storage, it would have cost them hundreds of dollars a month. Now we're charging less than $100 a month per server for the software and the backup and the cloud storage and everything. And we just, at one point, we contacted our customers and said, hey, we're going to be changing our cost. Your monthly bill's going to go down. I hope you don't mind. And oddly enough, we have 2 clients who have still not switched to this plan. I'm like, I will charge you less money if you say yes. And I never get a yes from them. And it's been a conversation for about a year. So if it sounds like I'm dancing around it, I'm not. I'm dancing around it because there's an incredible amount of flexibility. The other question, though, is if a customer decides to invest, if they invest in, well, if they invest in the BDR device, they've bought hardware, and that hardware is specifically there for doing the backup and the virtualization. If that hardware becomes obsolete, either because the age of the hardware, the amount of storage, then it's their hardware. They need to up it. If they're getting it through us for a monthly fee, we've agreed to back up their server, so that's my problem. So if a hard drive on one of the BDRs fails and we get an alert for it, that's my nickel. Doesn't matter what the monthly agreement is for the customer. If it's my BDR, I have to replace it. If they run out of space, I have to put bigger hard drives in. Because it's my device, it's my responsibility. Or if it just becomes obsolete, I have to replace it. So it kind of depends if you look at this as a service versus you look at this as a purchase. It's what everybody's doing. If you take a look, for example, Adobe is moving much more into the software as a service. But as long as there's an as a service to any of this IT stuff, you lose the capital investment, but you also, or should, lose the we're locked into a corner. Now, there are some people who are going to say, well, I'd rather have the capital investment because then I know that's the cost, and I'm willing to gamble a little bit that that's going to serve me for X number of years. That's fine. We're cool with that.
I guess I was asking, thinking in terms of the business owner who looks at it and says, my operating environment in 2016 with mobile and remote users and so forth is much more complicated than it was 10 years ago. The ransomware, all the things with malware and so forth, adds another layer of complexity to it.
Right.
The nonsense with bringing your own device and how you strategically, from a business perspective, dial that into. It's not a very simple solution. So the catch-all phrase to the owner is, well, it's a cost of doing business because we have to address all these compelling and competing concerns.
So here's the challenge, and this is, again, depending upon the relationship we have with our customers, is that when you look to expand your business operations, which you would say was BYOD, mobile devices, offsite, this, that, or the other, because that's what that is. That's expanding your business operations, your business processes. There is a cost to maintaining that infrastructure and making sure that business process is operating, whether it be we're doing it, or you bring somebody on inside, you bring in a third party, or you don't do anything and hope it really, really goes well. That is part of the cost of your business. That's the cost of doing business in your business expansion. You may not realize it at the moment, but it is. And what we want to do is we want to have those conversations. And we've had conversations with customers where they go, yeah, I don't care. Where they're willing to take the risk, because there's only these two guys who are running that program remotely. So it's to which we're going to say, here's the risk. If you're okay with it, I am one of the most politest people when it comes to I told you so's, but I get to do I told you so's. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a black and white.
No, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get anybody who thinks this is slowing down, this is going to speed up. We are just starting, and this is part of the future of the professions. We are just starting to see information technology really used. One of the terms that I've been working with lately is when we first started IT, it was information technology. It was about making the boxes bigger, stronger, faster. That was the majority. The information was processed, it was this, it was that, but the focus was on making the boxes bigger, stronger, faster. And that was till about, I would say, 2000, 2003. From 2003 till recently, it was information technology. We were still doing a lot of improvements of the technology, all that kind of thing, but now we're starting to use the information. The whole concept of BI, the whole concept of ERP, the whole concept of all that stuff really started to mean something. That the server works. Of course the server works. Why wouldn't the server work? But look at all this data, look at all this stuff. Now we're not there yet, but now we're starting to get into information technology, where it's what we do with all this data that's really going to start singing. And oddly enough, what's happening is you're starting to see people enter into the workforce who grew up on computers. And I don't think there's any accident of the things happening that way. So anyway, that's a topic, man, I can tell you I can go on for hours on that because I find that absolutely fascinating. So anyway, we will be back January. We will have our IT trends for 2017. Wow. So we'll be back here for that. And thank you.